Thank you for joining us for the 7th season of Inside the Dancer's Studio, where we bring listeners like you closer to the creative process. Celebrating a decade of rigorous play and positive failure, NCCAkron is an incubator and hub for dance research and development and serves as a connector, a catalyst, and a cultural matchmaker. Inside the Dancer's Studio is recorded as an ongoing documentation practice with NCCAkron visiting artists. In this episode, NCCAkron's Executive Artistic Director, Christy Bolingbroke, enters the studio with San Francisco, California-based choreographer and dancer Sean Dorsey. Dorsey creates powerful explorations of human experience through intimate storytelling and transpositive pedagogy.
Hey friends, Christy Bolingbroke here, and I'm really excited about today's Inside the Dancer's Studio podcast guest. Welcome, choreographer Sean Dorsey. In your own words, what is choreography?
And I love this question. And choreography, I think, is different to every human body and different even to that particular body on any day of our lives. So today, for me, choreography is alchemy. It is much more than the sum of its parts. It is created with intention, care, trust, and vulnerability, and is an exquisitely sacred offering.
It reminds me of some of the magic words that came up from that peer conversation too, which very rarely focused on, I think, what a lot of people think choreography is. It's limbs, it's space, it's tricks, it's this, that. And I appreciate, too, that it can be a shifting idea as far as a moment and who we are navigating through life and the world, because change is the one constant.
Yes.
So take us back to maybe the first time. When did you first call yourself a choreographer?
Oh, goodness. So I definitely did not ever, as a young person, envision myself as a choreographer or set out to be a choreographer. And I think I made work for some time before that moniker even felt semi-comfortable for me to claim. Maybe that's all of us, like imposter syndrome as artists. And I think especially as a trans person. So because my first love was being in my body dancing, and I was always creating, but my creation was much more focused on, improvisationally moving, yes, but in terms of craft, it was much more around written poems and written stories and composing music and playing composed music. And it was really the very deeply felt absence of people like me on the stage that became the fire in my belly that drove me to want to craft dances that spoke to me and my people's experiences or bodies or histories or lives. So I kind of came to that word or identity through like a side door, but love it, feel so blessed, feel like it's my calling. And whether we come in the front door or the side door or the skylight, we can come to our calling in many ways and just feel so richly blessed. This is my life. How lucky am I?
It reminds so much that I think one of dance's largest challenges, especially in the U.S., is the relationship to the body. If people are not in their body, come to my dance show can still be one of the scariest invitations.
Absolutely.
We're not, but they just the unknown where they're like, will there be audience participation? Will I be comfortable watching other people's bodies?
Totally.
And so to sort of highlight that can also be the artist's challenge. What is your relationship to your body? And then is this a tool that you want to exercise and utilize to tell your story, to be representative on stage? I'm going to circle back to the words because what I love about this podcast is that I learn so much. No one artist makes work like the next. So where do you begin? Does that start still from a place of writing? And if not, when might the writing become a part of your practice? Because I'm offering a big hypothesis there, but I'm guessing it is a part of your practice, especially having seen your work.
So my work always has some engine of language embedded in it, whether that is speaking on stage, whether that's story in pre-recorded sound score, or whether that's choreography that like right now, as we're having this conversation, my dancers are in the studio just down the hall working on movement generation using some written prompts of mine. And then those live in their bodies and are expressed through movement. And it might be the movement that ends up being on the stage without the words.
Even if it's not spoken.
Yeah. So where does it begin? For me, the most unconscious way the work starts is actually in the previous work of mine, that there are like unanswered questions or a spark of a question that begins. So but I'm much less conscious of that until I may be partway through the process. And the work always begins for me both with music and, yes, with a lot of writing and a lot of reading. And then also a lot of like looking at visual art, looking at a lot of painting especially, and sculpture are really resonant, rich sources of inspiration for me. I'll always say that I probably literally fill up 30 notebooks for a new project before I even maybe know what the heck I'm doing.
Oh my goodness, let's get you a notebook sponsor.
Totally, yes, literally. So a lot of writing and then a lot of listening to music and then working with the composers I'm so blessed to collaborate with for our last project, The Lost Art of Dreaming. You know, that magical liminal moment when you're in the theater and the lights are going down and the orchestra starts warming up and there's that single they all agree on. So I gave that as a prompt to the brilliant composer Annomie Bell that I'm so blessed to work with. And they took that and we had some back and forth iterations. And that whole track was composed before I brought it into the studio with my dancers. So much of the time I will have written text, even recorded a draft if there's text in that section, or have myself the written narrative or imagery or abstract text that's going to inform me without us hearing it. I will almost certainly have the music that I'm interested in working with for that section. But I also often won't play it when we generate movement. And I'm totally now getting on a tangent further into the process. But how it is sparked is all these things. So it's like, you know, I filled up 12 notebooks of writing while listening to music, while meeting with composers, having been to many galleries and spent time looking at paintings or looking at paintings while listening to drafts of tracks from my composers. And then there's also like little bits of dancing around in my living room and recording myself doing goofy experiments of little nuggets of what I imagine growing into kind of movement vocabulary or themes for a section.
To reflect on what you shared, there is so much inside of that when I think about certainly reaffirming what I subscribe to, that everything an artist makes is somehow related to their previous work and will somehow be related to their next work, whether they know it or not.
Totally,
because
yes.
You are the same body and thinker, and you're sort of holding that as a continuous vessel or griot through that experience.
Yes.
I was going to inquire about how you would characterize your relationship to sound, because what I also heard was this sort of amalgamation of layering and iterativeness, and it's definitely not a linear process.
Oh, no.
And I think
sometimes I'm like, if only.
If only it was just a formula, a recipe. Yes.
I have things to say already, but I'm going to let you finish the question.
And so I'm really curious how you continue to navigate a relationship to sound, that it doesn't sound that it's formulaic, that there's spaciousness to accumulate over time. And ultimately, how do you know when something is finished?
Yes. Oh, my goodness. Well, to answer your last question first, I feel like so often my answer to things is like, my gut just knows, which is a totally not helpful answer.
But so artistic.
But it's just true. It's like when all the like parts of your gut and heart and spirit are like and kind of align, and no one can see the body movements I'm doing, but all the things kind of like...
But it's like the vertebrae just aligning.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and they're aligned. And I know one of the things you ask about is advice for someone entering a making practice at whatever age. And so I'm thinking about the example where all of us, like there's a pop song we love or some song we have a really...
Speaks to your heart.
It speaks to your heart, and it like makes you feel the feels and just makes you feel generative and creative. And something I would say to someone beginning a practice or exploring new ways in their practice of making is, if I were to generalize or essentialize, which is dangerous, I would say I would not recommend letting the length of that song dictate the length of that dance. The length of a dance needs to be the length of whatever that story is. Now, story meaning expressing an idea, story meaning writing the arc of an emotion into a conclusion or emotion into a question. Whatever the thing is you're trying to express needs to dictate the shape and length of the thing. People will select a 19-minute song or suite of songs they're just in love with, and it's like the piece feels too long because they're making it to fill up the music versus the story that I'm creating needs to be this length, which is almost always shorter than the piece of music you're in love with.
We had dinner last night with your dancers, and we were talking about I will sit through 2 hours if it's compelling, but then you have to come back to the choreographer. Is it a 2-hour idea?
Yes, that's totally it. Yeah. So is that a 19-minute idea if you love that 19-minute song? And if it's not, recommending either working with GarageBand that comes free on your laptop or a friend who has access to some sound software and editing that down to the length of your idea.
Make friends with talented musicians.
Absolutely. Here's this gem of an idea that I love in this song. Can you create something that is not 19 minutes or 2 hours and 11 minutes.
Yeah. I'm still stuck on your relationship to sound. And one of the things that I also appreciate about the work I've gotten to see of yours, whether it's The Secret History of Love or The Missing Generation, is that it almost feels documentary because you are uplifting other people's stories from the LGBTQIA community and history. So I'm curious, how was your process when you're also holding other people telling their stories and the documentation of that? How did that start to sort of inform the sound score?
Those two pieces were part of a trilogy of works that I created that were seeking to uncover, unbury parts of LGBTQI plus histories that have been censored or buried or forgotten. So The Missing Generation, I recorded 75 hours of oral histories. I did not set out to record 75 hours, but it was such an incredible, over a year, about a year and a half of this process of getting to travel to different cities and talking to longtime survivors from that early part of the AIDS epidemic. First recording these 75 hours of people's stories. And I'll actually just insert that was an important part of the project. So this all wasn't in service of like making a show for the stage. So for me, part of my social practice was wanting to show up for survivors and sit at a table just like this with very similar microphones. I didn't have the fancy wind guard, but I had a plate of cookies and tissues, which were always used.
Note to the file, we need cookies.
Cookies. Yeah. Just showing up for survivors and listening and witnessing stories that every single person I talked to was like, no one's asked me about this for 30 years. I have locked this away and repressed this because there was so much trauma and so much pain and loss that I couldn't look at this, So just creating a space for that kind of unlocking of trauma and a space to hold it and witness it with permission and trust to then share parts of those stories through a work on stage. So just sharing that's part of that was a thing in itself. That wasn't only in service of like extracting, it wasn't an extractive or, and then still working toward archiving these so that they're available as a resource for many, many people in the future. So then I stopped clocking at 500 hours that I spent listening and listening and listening to these stories, making I think over 60 different Word documents that might have been themed.
This is long before AI transcripting.
Oh my goodness. I refuse the AI. I do not welcome AI. I don't judge, but I'm AI free in my creative process. So it's true, long before anyone could sort and file, or some robot owned by Zuckerberg or whoever could do that for me, then I was terrified, frozen on how on earth, who am I to do this? How on earth can I do justice to these incredibly sacred, precious offerings people have opened up so deeply and want so much for these stories to be shared with their peers, younger generations. So there was a lot of anxiety, depression, self-questioning.
Right. It's not only an iterative process, but it's also one you're with yourself as the vessel. And I'm thinking about your definition of choreography and alchemy too inside of this.
Yeah.
I like to say that particularly contemporary dance artists is not an aesthetic. It means it is artists who make work about living in contemporary times. So much of what you shared, though, expanded it. I'm glad we got to hear about your social practice, because your work has always been bigger than just your latest dance piece.
Right.
Whether it's through the Fresh Meat Festival and the community that you have continued to build and develop in the San Francisco Bay Area and wherever you've toured.
Right.
Thinking about that community, and yes, it's Sean Dorsey dance, but you also bring dancers into this process. So with this kind of intimacy and tenderness that you've been describing when you're making a work, what do you look for in dancers?
If you have seen some of my work, you know that I work with dancers who are technically exquisite, are gorgeous movers, technically gorgeous, agile. So that's kind of all like a given for me.
That's the minimum.
That's the minimum. But what's so that's a minimum. What's most important, because my work is very collaborative, and so collaborating with artists who have a deep understanding of creating and performing work as a human. So I'm not looking for technician empty vessels who will execute movement, which I know some modern dance is very much of that. So many different dance forms. The bodies might be interchangeable, like, oh, I could do an audition and some new casting and just swap out folks. Whereas this is about choosing collaborators who bring such a maturity of presence with their humanity, emotionality in the work on stage. So we're always aware that we're watching humans, like how the life in someone's eyes and their depth of focus. Those are depth of focus and eye focus are huge in my choreography. Actually, that's something that I will often choreograph, not inauthentically, but that kind of
attention is given.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like so much modern dancers are kind of, they have to shut off their humanity and do that kind of glazed, neither here nor there.
Well, especially in postmodernism.
Yeah, which is like, and that's great, and that's over there. And
that's
over
a different aesthetic.
Totally. I'm like interested in humans who are feeling feelings in order that we can transform audiences, and our risk and vulnerability allows audiences to also crack open and experience that amongst themselves, between each other, with us. So real maturity of performance presence. And real maturity of communication style, meaning in the studio, in collaboration, folks who, have maturity of communication in terms of expressing ideas, expressing a difference in ideas, able to stay grounded in communication through differences, able to really come from a heart-centered place of kindness. Kindness is like my number one rule. I always say that when I teach. It's like number one rule is kindness to yourself. Kindness to each other. There's so much mistreatment of dancers. And, the same, I'm sure, goes in theater. So that there's like the director who holds the power and you can say and treat others, however. And it's like the dance studio should be a microcosm of the liberated world we're seeking to be part of building. My work, I hope, is in service of a liberated future. And so too must our process be, which I feel like I did not always experience as a dancer.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly important to me. And because my work, some of those past works that you talked about had a documentary process to them based in oral histories or archival research, there have been processes where we offered our own stories and lives, but there's such a deep level of trust and risk and vulnerability required to collaborate in my work that I have to show up with that container of softness and flexibility and kindness, or you can't generate that kind of trust in order to do that really deeply human work that sometimes is really painful. We laugh a lot in the Sean Dorsey Dance Studio or in the Sean Dorsey Dance van on tour.
Yes.
Laughter is super important, and just flexibility, like showing up as full humans. If someone has an injury or is exhausted or is grieving, you know, that's the human that I'm collaborating with. And for them not to just check all that at the door, you know, to show up as our full selves.
I think what you're describing, and I do believe that it is getting better, but it is the shift between my description of what a 20th century dance making environment and field is and the 21st century. And you're really right on the cusp, right? Sean Dorsey Dance is 20, 25 years old.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's kind of exactly where we are.
Right.
So you know, old enough to know how it used to be, to want to do better and differently moving forward.
Here.
And then as you're describing it too, I'm thinking like you're talking about workplace culture, right? Whether it's an office or a studio or the tour van, that's something else that a leader does. And a choreographer also has to be a leader, even in a collaborative environment.
Absolutely,
you know, and setting the tone for that. I'm really curious thinking about your toolkit then. So when it's not happening, when that's the time you have time in the studio, or you know, have a deadline and the show has a date and a theater and you're like, we still have to find a way forward, but the muses are not singing. You know, it's just not coming through. Do you have any practices that you do to sort of reset, regroup, or just muscle through?
You know, there are artists who talk about, you know, never having a day where they have writer's block, or they never run out of ideas. And I'm like, who are these magical creatures of another
They're
species?
lying.
They're lying. I agree. So my beloved partner of 23 years, Shauna Virago, who is also a trans artist, she's a singer-songwriter, is such a great coach for me at all times. And then in those times when I'm really discouraged or exhausted or just feeling like I'm up against a brick wall. And she's just always says, you know what? You just have to show up. You just got to keep doing the practice, you know? So it's really easy to want to stop and shut down and fold inward and hide away under the blankets, which sometimes actually is the right thing to do. It's like, it's also okay.
It's what the body's telling you it needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes so I definitely I'm not about muscling through, for sure. That's not my jam, nor would I encourage that in the Sean Dorsey Dance Studio. And there's also something about showing up for the muse, you know? So unfortunately, we can't dictate or predict when the creative spark and, you know, sacred electricity arrives. And so my partner just talks, you know, you just got to show up at the desk or show up in the studio. And there's those flat, empty days. I got nothing. Here comes the deadline. And then, but when you show up is making space for, you know, the electricity to spark.
What I also hear in showing up that is very identifiable, I think, in dance is momentum. And momentum comes at a lot of different speeds, but it is definitely easier to go with momentum, even if it's slow going, than to completely stop and try to pick up again from a standstill.
Right.
We understand momentum as dancers, and sometimes showing up is the minimum that we can do to keep momentum.
Right.
Yeah, just continue to move forward. Don't have to work, you know, muscle through it, you know, and force it. But yes, I like this idea of you got to keep showing up.
Yeah, and staying open. So like you said, not muscling through. It might be like, I do need to daydream in bed with a book of poetry, but that's still just leaving yourself open. Also, what for me is such a huge gift is my collaborators.
Mm-hmm.
So the days when I'm like discouraged and running on empty, getting to work with my beloved family, my collaborating dancers, who someone else in the room has a spark, based on something we're building or a prompt I have, and I may just be feeling so flat and empty and exhausted that day, but then they create this exquisite movement or duet material that then just gets me going.
It gives you more momentum.
Totally.
It fans the flames.
Totally. Or same with my composers, like I'll receive in the email a new track by one of the composers I'm working with and
unlock.
Yeah, unlock. And then I see and I see the lights and the costume and I see it all and it, So collaboration is such a gift that way that you're not just alone in a room, hitting your head against the wall trying to make the thing.
I mean, that's what I hear both in what you shared about your relationship with Shauna as a coach and there to commiserate to, but also with your collaborators is community.
Totally. Yes.
And I think that might also be a 20th century trope, the idea of the tortured single artist perpetuating, that someone has to go off into the woods. We like the woods, but you don't have to do it alone.
Totally. You don't have to be miserable alone.
You don't have to be miserable alone.
Yeah.
And so I think that also you've revealed a lot to us about how you have navigated this field and the longevity of the career that you have by creating community, both on stage and off.
Right.
I'm curious, as a person of many words, how do you tackle the creative challenge to title something?
Almost all the time, titles have come to me first, which is really interesting. So, The Missing Generation, for example, the previous project was The Secret History of Love, and I had the great privilege of recording oral histories with LGBTQI plus elders and seniors, asked them about their lives and how on earth they found love and community decades ago and navigated law enforcement and gathering underground in illegal speakeasies and clubs and on and on. And during that process, I became very aware that there was a whole generation I couldn't interview because we had lost so many folks in the early AIDS epidemic. The title came to me, The Missing Generation. The title came first, and actually what I thought I was being called to do was to try to document stories from folks about folks we lost. So I thought the work would be about lifting up the folks we were missing, the folks we lost. And then immediately upon my first pre-oral history interview conversations I had with folks before we met to actually record things, there was so much that our culture had just turned our back on all these survivors who were just living with all this locked in trauma. And then none of us asking about or being curious about or offering any healing around or offering to keep that history alive and remember and teach our descendants about. So the title was clear, but the content actually shifted. I was like, oh, I'm being called to show up as a witness and to support these survivors. So same with The Lost Art of Dreaming. That title came to me first. So, and that's true also even often of short pieces that the title will come first for whatever reason. Sometimes with a very clear sense of content and sometimes like, I don't know what the heck this is, but this is what is being called to come out of me.
I mean, I feel just in the short time you've been here on the ground, we're about halfway through your creative residency, and you have taught me so much and the team when it's like, oh, the creative residency doesn't just have to be working towards a finished product. It's become much more retreat-like, spacious to say, actually, we're not going to come into the studio today, or we're going to explore this cool thing and being together, maybe more tour van times to inform the what that this might be becoming and be a part of.
Yeah, I think it's, again, that the kind of the more old-fashioned expectation that we kind of hunker down, and hunkering down is totally part of the process. There's a part where we're like hunkering down and generating. Work. Totally. It's like, it is, yes, let there be no illusion. It is a lot of really hard work. There's grunt work, there's hard work.
Yeah.
Yes. And part of not just at the beginning of the work, but all throughout the cycles within making a work, for me, is like constantly needing to refill the well. And so it's like that creative fueling. It's constantly like for us as a family of collaborators. So we haven't been together in person for a couple of months. My mom passed unexpectedly during a journey with cancer. And so I had to leave, and we've not been together. And so having this time to reconnect and get to like be in the woods and be in beautiful nature, sharing meals together, this is all a part of building the trust and that iterative energy that then we're in the studio today creating work. But for me, it's all generative and it's all fueling the process. And so that the fueling time, the fallow time, that kind of retreat time is so generative and is so necessary to fuel the like, okay, you know?
And how beautiful to hear you reflect. And I'm reminded what you shared earlier about what you look for in dancers that also can be human. And the fact that you have a community in your cast who can also receive you, the choreographer, as a human.
Yes.
In this moment.
Right.
It's just want to reflect that back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And it is such a gift that even though I always am in a leadership position, that I can also be a human and be in my grief or, and that grief process is shifting what this new work is about and will inform it. And
because you are making work about the times and places and the people that we are.
That's right.
I have one last question, Sean.
I'm excited for it.
If you would like to pass on the greatest piece of advice you received in navigating a creative life, or if you have a piece of advice that you'd wish to pass on, even if you made it up yourself. So this is a moment of paying it forward.
I'm still not great at practicing, but which I can offer as advice is the piece around fallow and refueling and the importance of nourishment and rest. And I feel this as someone who's a leader in my company, but who also founded a nonprofit 25 years ago and has held that artistic director, executive director hat. And to live a sustainable life as a creator or in the nonprofit arts world, you need periods of rest. Get the book Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown.
Okay, Pleasure Activism. I hadn't heard that yet. Okay.
Get it today. So rest, pleasure, joy, play, such important parts, not just the bearing down. So
the laughter in the tour van.
Yes. There's got to be naps. There's got to be like ice cream sundaes. These are all part of the creative process, not just the bearing down and the whatnot. And then maybe also just thinking about folks like me who, whatever it is about your experience or your body that makes you feel different or like you don't belong in dance, finding folks like you. Now there is the interwebs, there is the social media. So if you can find a mirror where there's folks like you moving or making, that can help you to not feel so alone in it.
There's something particularly in intersecting or weaving two of those pieces of advice, finding folks so you don't have to be alone and showing up.
I'll repeat and share my partner Shauna Virago's advice. As I have two pieces of advice, but again,
wise.
to just show up. So to know that maybe there are those rare birds who wake up every day feeling excited and positive and like overflowing with ideas for the studio.
Don't believe them on social media.
Don't believe them on social media. You know, everyone lives their best life on social media, even if secretly they're depressed, anxious, directionless, etc. So in real life, creation is hard. Like there's a lot of hard. There's moments of, there can be long periods of blockage or uncertainty, certainly questioning yourself, questioning your choices. And I think just staying the course and showing up for your muse, showing up for the process. So keep showing up and know that the creative muse will not always be felt in full force, but it's there.
Inside the Dancers Studio Conversation Series is produced by NCCAkron and supported in part by Audio-Technica, a global audio manufacturer with U.S. headquarters in Northeast Ohio. Our podcast program is produced by Lisa Niedermeyer of Handmade Future Studio. Rahsaan Cruz is our audio engineer, with transcription by Arushi Singh, theme music by Flaco Torres, and cover art by Micah Kraus. Special thanks to Laura Alicott, Nikisha Moore Dunson, Dante Fields, Jen Garlando, and Mary Claire Hulbert. To learn more about NCCAkron, please visit us online at nccakron.org and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCCAkron. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching for Inside the Dancers Studio. Thanks for listening, and stay curious.